of business. In other words, NATO must go out of area or it's out of business. Well, you're dealing with an alliance of people where there's very little to hold them together in terms of threat perception. If you live in Spain or Italy, your perception of the threat is largely from the Middle East and North Africa. You certainly don't feel threatened by the Russians. And that was true in 1998 and 99 when I was still serving at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. The French, frankly, saw it in the same light. The Germans sort of sat in the middle and said, well, we didn't sign up to go to war. We signed up to be part of a defense community. Yep. Why are we doing these things? And so we began sort of grudgingly dragging people into this sort of thing. And it's been a catastrophe in my judgment. The people that are most enthusiastic are always the people that are farther away than anybody else. Canada, the Canadians will sign up. The Norwegians will sign up. The Swedes. In other words, if you're not in the immediate path of the disaster that we're creating by the conflict that we're promoting, well, then fine, let's go for it. And they're willing to believe the propaganda that Russia is entirely evil and Ukraine is some sort of pristine democracy that has to be protected at all costs. Well, it's all nonsense. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, you mentioned Brzezinski, and it makes me think back to, in Grand Chessboard and Strategic Vision, he talks about the importance of Ukraine and what the West has to do to, control this locale, because that's the control of the heartland, right? And so if Russia had this transition and sort of underwent this collapse in the 90s and it became something different, is the modus operandi just to continually make sure that we keep them at bay? I mean, from the Western Atlanticist perspective, to just make sure that they're sort of in their own domain and weak to a degree. And is all of what's going on really just to make sure that they don't become something more powerful beyond what something that the West could control? Is that the modus operandi here? Because I remember Dr. Quigley saying something to the effect of that basically the two world wars of the last century and the Cold War were basically just to maintain and deplete and sort of exhaust the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russia. The two main competitors to the Anglo-American establishment had to be weakened and sort of just contained. Is that really what's still going on with this overall strategy with the Ukraine?
Well, I think the Anglo-American viewpoint is largely unchanged. We want to be in control of everything. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we will set out to weaken any combination of states or state that we think threatens our dominance. We dominate the financial system. And as a result of dominating the financial system, we've been able to ship trillions of dollars of debt overseas to other people. We certainly don't want to change that particular relationship. But in truth, we've gone too far. And I think we're going to see all of that change. I think we're going to watch the dollar-based international commerce go away. It's going to take time because the institutions that have to compete with ours don't exist, but they will. And that's what you hear with the BRICS. That's what Russia, India, and China are talking about. But I think strategically, there's also this undercurrent that we have to not just weaken, but ultimately destroy the regime in Moscow, mm-hmm. because that's the pathway to isolating and ultimately to control and dominate China. This is this sort of nonsensical notion that we will never be safe until everyone else is destroyed. This, of course, is what happened with Napoleon Bonaparte. Bonaparte could have called it quits several times. He could have lasted for another 30, 40 years before he passed away. And he could have had a much larger and more powerful French empire in Europe. But he was always consumed with the possibility that someone else would come out of the woodwork and challenge him. And so he impaled himself on this Russia expedition when there was no need to do so. The outcome was that Germany rises in revolt, combines with Russia, and ultimately destroys Bonaparte and France. The British, of course, didn't contribute much to it except money, gold. And the gold that came out of London financed the Prussians and the Russians and everybody else that was German to fight Bonaparte. Mm-hmm. I think we're in a similar situation right now, and they're thinking in terms of doing this to Russia as a step on the road to dealing with China. I think it's very foolish. It's not going to work. They completely miscalculated. The intelligence assessments were all wrong. Russia has always been swimming in an abundance of minerals, precious metals, food, agriculture, oil, gas, all of it. How do you isolate a country like that? That's an impossibility because everyone wants to buy from it. Everyone needs Russia. Where are you going to get your fertilizer if you can't get it from Russia and White Russia? And now you can't get it from Ukraine, obviously, because you've got a war underway. How do you feed yourself? I mean, they're responsible for so much of the food in the world, and we can't supplant that. And then, of course, you have this state, which is not really dependent on us and has been working to become financially independent of us. And that's something else that has bothered the financial gurus and oligarchs in the West, that Russia doesn't want to be in debt. It doesn't want to be under our thumbs. It's impossible to defeat Russia unless you go to the nuclear level. And at that point, if you try to do it, then you're going to be completely annihilated yourself. Russia has the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world. That's insane. So nobody's going to use nuclear weapons. So that drives you back down to high-end conventional operations. How are you going to do that? We're not going to mobilize for war. We can't even recruit enough quality soldiers for the United States Army and Marines, let alone Navy and Air Force. Who are we kidding? Is the United States prepared to mobilize itself for a full-on war in the middle of what?
Marching under the banner of wokeness and rainbows.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So this thing is going to end. It's not going to end well for us. It's going to end badly for us. I think Russia will come out just fine, and the Ukrainians will end up being the principal victims. But the Europeans are going to be furious because they're all suffering economically because of this war. That's why they're now admitting to Ukraine fatigue. It's very real.
Yeah, this makes me think too. You mentioned in your recent op-ed piece at American Conservative, the Morgenthau Plan, and I was just reading about that a couple of days ago in a book that's sort of the history of socialism, and how this Morgenthau Plan was a sort of a debt reconstructed to put Germany into debt in the post-war period. And I think you were likening that to the present situation, that the exportation of democracy and human rights is a cover really to just sort of put these countries into debt in terms of future generations. That was a big insight that I read in Quigley as well, that, you know, this is really the restructuring of these countries, as you said, to do regime change, to then put the next generation into debt. So we're exporting not just this faux human rights thing, but and fake democracy. That's all a cover for debt-based control for these countries. But like you said, it seems to me that you can't continually run an empire on infinite debt. I mean, it has to pop at some point, right?
Well, one would think so. I'm surprised it hasn't already popped, but I think we're getting closer. But when it comes to Germany, you have a self-destructive regime and society that has been brainwashed into loathing itself.
Yeah.
I'm very pro-Israel. I've always been very supportive of the state of Israel for reasons that have to do with what happened in the Second War. And also, I think they deserve to have a state. Everybody who thinks, well, it should be somewhere else, that's fine. Unfortunately, it's not. It's where it is. So we need to get along with that. And I still feel that way. But the Germans have engaged in something that people frequently talk about, the self-loathing Jews that hate Israel. I don't see them as a big threat, but to Israel, but you have a lot of self-loathing Germans that have been brainwashed over the last 50, 60 years to see themselves in a, permanent negative context. Now, the result of it right now is that this regime is deindustrializing Germany.
Yeah.
That's a catastrophe, not just for Germany. It's a catastrophe for Europe and the world. I mean, the German economy is what, third or fourth in the world on any day? And if you deindustrialize it by robbing it of access to cheap energy, you're going to destroy the scientific industrial base. That scientific industrial base is very important to us. It's very important to Russia. And everybody says, well, you don't want to make yourselves dependent upon Russia, but Russia is dependent on Germany. It has been for decades, hundreds of years, for access to machinery, engineering, technology. We treat this thing, as I said earlier, as something bad for us. It doesn't have to be bad at all. But now Germany is being destroyed. How much longer will this go on before the Germans wake up? That's why this Nord Stream 2 fiasco is so destructive.
Yeah.
Because if you want good relations in the world, where do you want good relations? You want good relations with Moscow, Berlin, Beijing, and I would argue also Tokyo. Tokyo is a sleeping giant. Oh, they're going to go into a lot of trouble because they have their own financial issues, but they're going to come out. Tokyo has a brilliant scientific industrial base, very high human capital. You want to look around at what is critical in 21st century? High human capital. Germany has it. Israel has it. Tokyo has it. We have it if we'll preserve it and advance it and cultivate it instead of actively attacking it, which is what we've been doing. So if you look at those things, everything we're doing is antithetical to our interests right now.
Yeah, right.
And we're going to end up with enemies all over the world. I mean, we're destroying all the goodwill that we ever enjoyed during the Cold War.
Do you see that, does this possibly fit into the overall plan of the deindustrialization of the West as a long-term game plan to bring us under a kind of a post-industrial world where we have this sort of technocracy and this so almost a dystopian sort of vision out of the mind of people at Davos who want, a global federation and the erasure of all nation states and this new era, this new order that they're calling for that requires, getting rid of cars, getting rid of industry, getting rid of oil, getting rid of all of the things that just so happen to really undergird the West, including the dollar, and moving to some sort of, electronic CBDC or something like this. I mean, does this deindustrialization of Germany and the West fit into that overall project in your view?
Well, it would seem so. I mean, clearly the World Economic Forum has an agenda that is ultimately destructive to Western civilization.
Right.
There's no question about it. This open borders thing is designed to dilute and ultimately destroy us, the people of the West. That's absolutely unambiguously clear. Now, everyone wants to attach some sort of grand strategy that's being hatched at Davos. I don't know that I would go that far. What I would say is that Sam Huntington was right when he wrote about these super empowered people that are part of this cosmopolitan elite that feels no connection whatsoever to us. These are people with no national identity and no concern for national identity. They don't give a damn about anything, it would seem, and they seem to have embraced this sort of Marxist construct, which says that people are irrelevant. Race, religion, language, culture are meaningless. Well, that's an interesting idea, because we have a lot of evidence for the last several thousand years that they are absolutely vital and essential. Yeah. If I take you on a trip to Central Africa and you try to tell people there that their race, religion, language, and culture are meaningless, they're not going to sign on for that. You're not going to find anybody in Japan, Korea, China, or Vietnam to sign on for it. Who is signing on for this nonsense? Well, people in Western Europe, people in the United States, not everybody, but the elites. Yeah. These elites are cooperating, whether it's by design or it's accidental.